Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the future. I'd like to begin with a little story, a story from the history of the Disney Company. Tony Baxter, a name you've probably never heard before, was 6 years old, and he already knew that he just knew what should be added to Disneyland and what shouldn't, what should be fixed, what should never be changed. He just knew it when he was only 6 years old. He would go on in his 49-year career with Disney to design some of Disney's greatest attractions. Splash Mountain was his concept, so was Big Thunder Railway, the Indiana Jones ride, the new Fantasyland at 2 different parks, the Imagination Pavilion at Epcot, and all of Disneyland Paris. But I want to take you back to 1966, when he was 16 years old and lied about his age in order to get a job working at Disneyland in the Carnation ice cream parlor. And as he got that job, he just saw things going on at Disneyland he just knew Walt would not tolerate. This is wrong, this isn't right, we've got to fix this. He called the studio and tried to get an appointment to see Mr. Disney. He had a long list of things he needed to go over with him, but the studio, of course, did not return the call. Well, one day in the Carnation ice cream shop, there's a security guard, has a radio on, a little bit too loud, and Tony hears Code W, Tomorrowland. Now, being a bright lad, he figured out what that had to mean. So he took off his apron, said he needed to go on a bathroom break, snuck out the back door and ran to Tomorrowland, ran all over Tomorrowland, couldn't find Walt. So he sidled up next to another security guard, eavesdropped on the walkie-talkie. Code W, Frontierland. He ran to Frontierland, same result, no Walt. Code W, Fantasyland. He ran to Fantasyland, looked all over Fantasyland, couldn't find Walt. He eventually concluded Walt had left. He dragged his knuckles back to the Carnation place, where he'd now been on bathroom break for an hour and a half. And he was deeply depressed. That was probably his one and only chance to finally tell Walt all the things that were wrong with the park, all the things that immediately needed to be fixed. And as he stood there, he looked up, and in the doorway of Carnation, there was Walt Disney. And Walt strolled into the ice cream shop, walked right up to Tony, looked down at his name badge, and said, "Hi, Tony, how are things?" Tony said, "Fine." And that was the one and only meeting between Walt Disney and the person who would turn out later to be his most effective apprentice. Well, today we have 4 people who represent the future of NASA. These are the people that you are counting on to carry forward your legacy, to pay off some of the programs that you are now starting. And having just met them and spent some time with them, they aren't nearly as shy as Tony Baxter. I don't think we're going to get the one-syllable squeak from any of these guys. I'd like each to introduce themselves. Alex, why don't you start?
Hello, my name is Alex Case. I am currently a junior at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. I am majoring in aerospace engineering with a minor in electrical engineering. This summer, I'm going to be interning at Ball Aerospace in Boulder, and I'm really hoping to have a career in mission systems engineering.
Patrick?
I'm Patrick Dods. I'm a senior at the Naval Academy, just a couple miles down the road. I'm an aerospace engineering major, actually with the Astronautics track. I'm going to graduate here and go to grad school for a year, and then be on a submarine for at least 5 years after that. So, look forward to it.
My name's Clare Skelly. I am a senior graduating in December at University of Maryland College Park. I'm studying economics and minoring in astronomy, and I'm a current intern in the Office of Communications down the road at Goddard.
I'm Raphael Perrino. I'm currently studying space policy at GW, the Space Policy Institute. Finish up in May, and I currently work for the Torrey Group as an aerospace analyst.
Well, so my first question, I'm going to direct it initially to Alex, but then anybody can answer afterwards. So, Alex, if you're trying to get an internship at NASA, how are you going to do that, since I hear NASA's closed?
Well, I just start by Googling NASA internship and see where that takes me. But no, that's seriously an issue we face in our generation. Is I have had roommates who have come up to me and said, "Wait, you worked at NASA? I thought they were closed." And that's an issue that needs to be addressed. I don't like walking around U of I's campus and knowing that there are people there who think I'm going to be jobless because I'm an aerospace engineer, and that is just simply not the case. To work at NASA was a dream of mine, and I happened to be able to do that last summer. And going forward, I want to share with people that NASA does exist, they're doing really cool things, and that they're a necessity for our country, for the world, to do the science they do, to learn the things they do, so that we can better understand our planet and the universe we're in.
Anybody else want to respond to that?
From my perspective, it's not only the issue of people don't understand that NASA exists, but they don't understand all the opportunities there. Coming in as an Office of Communications intern, I didn't even really think about all the information that has to be put out to the public, and that there's a department for that, the business department, and all the other aspects that go into the everyday functions at NASA.
What do you think, now this is the generation once again that by 20 years from today will be running NASA. Incidentally, I should have started by introducing, will any other students who are here please stand up? Wow. So everybody that's not standing, your legacy is in good hands. Go talk to one of these people, any of these people. I think you'll be very, very pleased. But talking with these four, by 20 years from today, let's assume that the four of you are the top 4 people in NASA. What do you think will be your biggest problem 20 years from today?
I ran my first ship aground, but we don't have to talk about that.
You actually did, or you're getting ready to do?
I actually did. So let's hope NASA isn't my first job. But I think the biggest problem that NASA's going to face and does face is being able to get the American people and the general population to buy into what they're doing and actually support it in a way that's meaningful. We were able to do it in the 60s with the Apollo program, but are we able to do it today? And I think that we have a lot of good phrases and vague sayings that make us feel like we're doing a really great job, but I don't know if we're really taking the strides to greatness that we should be. I mean, we say we're going to be on Mars in 2030. Is that because we actually mean it, or is that because that's 20 years down the road and we can worry about it then?
Raphael?
So this is 2035, 2040?
2035.
Right around there?
Exactly.
Okay. All right,
That would be March, early March of 2000.
I would say our most pressing problem then, it grows from kind of the evolution of a certain industry today that is very exciting. This would be commercial space flight, through human space flight and through commercial cargo. By 2035, I envision that there is a pretty strong and hopefully sustainable toehold for commercial space. But I would also say that in order, and this has been debated many times, but I think there's a lot of validity to it, that if you're going to have a booming commercial space economy, you need to have the regulations in place to be able to handle that. And you need to have the international treaties in place to be able to accommodate it. And where the Outer Space Treaty is today, the 1967 Outer Space Treaty, it doesn't align with private investment, and I think that's going to be a really pressing issue in 2035. If we really want to expand the economic influence of the human species into the solar system, we need to grapple with some Cold War era infrastructures that exist.
All right, I'd like each of you to talk to me about why on earth are you here? You're all either in school or just about to get out of school, and I mean here today. You could be doing a lot of things. You got a day off from school. You could be at the fraternity or sorority drinking. You could be at some kind of athletic event. You could be studying for tests. Now, right now you're missing classes, so you're risking your academic record to be here. So why on earth are you here?
Space is the future. It's really that simple. I have been in love with space most of my life, pretty much ever since my father made me watch Star Trek First Contact, 16 years ago now, I want to say. And ever since then, I've wanted to go into space exploration because space is the final frontier. It's our duty to go out there, find what's out there, but not only just see what's out there, figure out how to use it for our benefit. And that's the part that we need to explain to people better about how, oh, we're not just exploring, we're going to have a better understanding so we can use it for our own benefit.
Patrick?
I'm here, I think, due to a clerical error, but I wouldn't say that I'm here because I want to go out into space someday. I think that one of the fundamental aspects of being human is wanting to solve problems, and the joy that problem solving actually brings. And I think that space presents us with a fabulous array of problems that we can solve in order to make ourselves better and make humanity a better thing. And I landed here, and I'm going to bloom where I was planted, and it's been fun, and I look forward to seeing what else I can do with it.
I'd say as much as I'm here today to talk to you guys, I'm more here for myself. It's been a great learning opportunity, and being at Goddard and going to the colloquiums they constantly have there and the speakers, that's a continuing learning opportunity for me. And I think as much as my education, I'd like to talk to you guys about educating younger generations about what you're doing, and that's really working with the MMS outreach team on a recent story. That's what I've kind of gotten from it and how important that is. I can make my own conscious decisions, but they really don't have the choice right now.
So why am I here today? That's the question. It goes back to when I was about 6 years old. I grew up at the Arlington Planetarium, now the David M. Brown Planetarium. Dad and I watched Cosmos for 13 Sundays in 1990. And so kind of the seeds of astronomy and passion for space were early and relentless. But ultimately, why am I still here? I think that previous generations, if you kind of draw the parallel to the fine arts, they had a lot of the tools and supplies, and they had the canvas, and they had the color palette, and they produced great compositions through Apollo and Gemini and the various other missions that came afterwards. Our generation has a chance to pick up the canvas again and to potentially use new media, use new color palettes, create new masterpieces, and that's why I'm here.
Now, I know that your mothers and fathers probably know what people in this business make as a salary, and that's why they're every once in a while probably tell you it's not too late to go into become an orthodontist or something like that. So how do you answer them? What do you tell them about why you're, in fact, it is not too late. Do you ever think about maybe doing something else instead? And how do you explain your decision to your parents?
No, I don't think about doing anything else. I've always loved building things. I've always wanted to solve problems, as Patrick alluded to earlier, and space has also been a passion, exploring. And when my mother says, oh, why don't you go be a lawyer? The rest of our family is, why don't you go make real money? And I respond with, but that's not what I love. And if you don't do what you love in life, why are you doing it at all? And so with that, I push on in this direction. I push on to reaching out humans farther than they've ever been. And I want to make a difference, something that's going to last for generations to come.
Anybody else? Okay, you've all talked about what's exhilarating and fun about the path that you're on. What is frustrating about the path that you're on right now?
I work for the biggest paperwork company in the world. That's all we do. But what's frustrating about it is it's a problem in the Navy. It's been recognized in the military, is that you have a huge number of young people. If we're going to use the military as an example, about 70% of them are between the ages of 18 and 23. And these are the people, if you're looking in the space industry now, if you're saying that we're going to be on Mars in 20 years, these are going to be the people who are piloting those missions or going on those missions. And yet those young voices are typically never heard. And their ideas are never taken into consideration, and they're not present, yet they make up the bulk of what we have. So I would be frustrated along this career path as to why are we not consulted? If I'm going to be the one inside of the Orion capsule as on its way to Mars, how come nobody's come up to me and asked me what I think should go in it? If you look at the EOD community, they had a bomb diffusing robot that was made by a bunch of old guys, and they said this is the best thing we've ever had. And the EOD techs, the explosive ordnance disposal guys, hated it. And it took a young systems engineer who said, no, this is a great robot, you just need a different controller, gave him an Xbox controller, and now they use it all the time. So we need to be consulted on this. And I don't think that that's a stretch to ask us what we feel should be in the stuff that we're going to be using.
Anybody else? Raphael?
I would say one of the most frustrating parts of this industry, at least in my brief period in it, it's the lack of continuity, and it's something that's written about so often. From administration to administration, from political wind to the next political wind, not knowing precisely whether you're going to be able to even be close to the roadmaps that you're creating today. 10 years from now, 5 years from now, 20 years from now, and that lack of continuity. Yes, you can use the previous technologies you've created for other programs and kind of build new systems with what's already been built. But this is something I had asked the administrator this morning, and I had said, let's say it's 2055. It's March 11, 2055. Where is the United States at that point? And his answer to me was, we'll probably be underground at Mars. He said maybe not something as extensive as colonies, but eventually we might get there. But he sees us doing these ambitious missions, in the subterranean surface of Mars. And I said, of course, I said to him, that sounds fantastic. His follow-up to that was that there needs to be a transition of NASA functionalities to the private sector for LEO, so that we could do these big things. But what I would add to that, though, is that we need to have some semblance of continuity beyond what we currently have, because without that, we'll still be, in cislunar space or orbiting the Earth in 2055.
Claire, do you have one for that?
I don't.
Okay. Patrick? Or did you already?
I already spoke.
All right, then Alex is missing. That's what I'm thinking.
The hardest and most frustrating thing about being an aerospace engineer and wanting to go into this field for me is something we've already talked about, and that's getting support behind what we do. We all understand, anybody sitting here understands what the value of going to space is, what the value of going to Mars is. How do we convey that to the rest of society? How do we convey to them, oh, it's important we go there? Why? That's the question that we seem to never have a great answer for when we're telling other people. And it's not just to explore, it's to learn. And that's the frustrating part, is a lot of people I talk to don't understand that.
How do you, I'd like each of you to paint what I'm going to call a destination postcard. This isn't what you want to do. I'd like you to move forward to March 11th, 2035, and describe in present tense what you do, as if it has already happened and is happening. March 11th, 2035. Talk to me about what you're doing, what kinds of people you're working with, what's happening in your life. We're not going to check on this later.
Being in prison for 5 years has been tough, but I plan that. 2035. I'm following my description of success, and I don't know the company for whom I will be working, or hopefully the one I'll actually be owning, but I'm going to be surrounded by people who are willing to challenge what's already been done and hope to do it in a new and better way. And if it's in the aerospace industry, if I'm working for I can't pick one because I'm going to annoy somebody in here, But for Lockheed Martin, and I'm in their space industry, I'm looking for a way in 2035 that we can get a permanent presence on Mars, that we can actually do something that's really valuable and gets humanity behind us.
That's a great answer. I'd like something more specific. Would you like to be on March 11th, 2035 on your way to Mars?
I actually really like Earth, but given the opportunity, I would probably not say no.
Okay. Who's next? Alex?
On March 11th, 2000.
March 11th, 2000. Be real specific. Where are you? What's your job title? What are you doing?
Hopefully I'm down in Houston, walking into mission control and about to talk to an astronaut on Mars. That would be a dream of mine, that I've helped plan that mission, get it there, and now I'm talking to them, hearing about their day, what their progress is on their science objectives, what have they found.
Claire?
I am on Capitol Hill writing and research policy, space policy, to get funding for all of the missions that you great engineers are working on.
You know, it'd be more help if you were a U.S. Senator.
I'll try.
So don't rule that out. I think that's a goal for 5 years from now.
2035. I would like to be a senior policy advisor, potentially at NASA, maybe to the administrator, maybe up in the A suite, and helping to kind of carve out the priorities and the potential paths for the agency as commercial flight or commercial space flight has already achieved its toehold in low Earth orbit, and helping to kind of define the next generation of Webb telescopes and Hubbles, and kind of just ushering a new era of human space flight and space science. That's where I want to be.
One second, I lost my place here. Pardon me just a moment. If you could have any job at NASA 2 years from today, any job at NASA, you can say, I want Charlie's job. You can say any job at NASA. Charlie's job probably is going to be available about 2 years from now, actually. So if 2 years from today, any job at NASA, what would you want to take? Assume one of your parents has just been elected president, so this is going to be possible.
Well, I'm going to go right to it and say I would love to have Administrator Bolden's job. I would love to be able to work with both NASA, the engineers, our policy, and also then be our representative working within the government, getting policies passed, pushing for them to fund the great things that we're doing, helping to explain to them why it's important, really being that go-between between them and administrating one of the greatest organizations on this planet, so they can give them the tools to push the boundaries as they want to. And I don't think there's any better job than being the administrator at NASA to be able to do that.
From a practical standpoint, I'd like to keep the job I have right now. But I'd like to stay in the writing and communications department. I think higher up administration's appealing, but I think what we do is really important. I'd like to be a more established heliophysics writer and do more things pertaining to astronomy and get more conversations with different engineers and scientists, but I like it where I am now.
You got one?
I'm a grunt, so I'd love to be an astronaut. If you were to twist my arm, I'd say yes to being an astronaut next 2 years.
Raphael?
Well, my whole reasoning, my whole goal behind going to the Space Policy Institute was to make a shift from a career as a technical writer. That was what I had done for about 5 or 6 years. I had a master's degree in that, and but to be able to make the Hohmann transfer, if you will, from one career to the other, I needed another master's degree, and Space Policy Institute gave me the opportunity, saying that midway through the degree I've been able to transition over to the Tory group, and I'm enjoying every minute of it. This is a really cool company, and I hope 2 years from now to still be with the company and getting more exposure to different parts of NASA. So far I've been able to work on GAO reports, OCFO stuff, strategic plans, been able to work on pioneering space, venture capital investment in the commercial spaceflight industry. And this is just all the stuff that I've been learning about in school. Now I actually get to get my hands into it. So yeah, I'd like to be where I am currently with more experience.
Your generation, not only yours, but all of the students here, that's the generation that is going to pay for a mission to Mars with their taxes. And that's also the generation that's going to complete that work. So this is a chance for this generation, and let's assume for the moment that the four of you are the future leaders of all of NASA. And now we're looking at many of the current leaders of NASA and the space program. What would you like them to clean up and fix finally before they hand you the keys? What are the things that you think are solvable on their watch that you'd like to have settled and figured out by your watch? You've touched on some of them, but it's okay to repeat. But what would you like them to finish? What business would you like them to finish up?
Give us an American-made launch vehicle. I don't want to fly on Russian engines anymore. I'm an American, and I was born that way, and I'm going to die that way. And I want a launch vehicle that I can rely on, that has some legacy behind it, that's going to get me from point A to point B safely and reliably.
And it's okay to have ask for several messes, but one at a time. Who's next? Alex.
I'd love for public relations to be fixed. I'd love for every citizen to know what we're doing in space. I'd love for every citizen to at least know that, oh, wait, we have private companies putting people in space, going to be putting people in space. That's something I'd like everybody to know. I'd love for them to know what we're doing, and hopefully they approve of it once they understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. And I think that's something I'd love to see fixed as quickly as possible.
I'd agree with that, but I don't know if that's something that NASA can fix just by themselves. I think a lot of it is stigmatism in the public, and it's going to take them kind of wanting this information. And that's something I kind of struggle with on a regular basis, is writing stories, and sometimes they're internal Goddard stories, but it's making them appealing to the public so they care too. And for example, I'm writing a piece on the upcoming solar eclipse next week, and it's only going to be visible from Europe, so it's kind of how do I spin it so people in the U.S. care, so they want to read that story.
Raphael?
Again, what we're trying to fix, what we want to fix.
No. We're telling them, here are the messes we want you to clean up and fix before we get there so that we don't have to.
All right, so I got one.
The question is deliberately asked in a mean way in order to be provocative.
I would say, and this was touched on earlier today, working on our international partnerships, I see the value in ITAR restrictions. I see the value in not giving away military secrets, and to be able to, what they did in the Apollo era when you redirect an ICBM, retrofitted ICBM to be able to land within a mile radius. There are cross applications of it. I get that. But I think that we could step up our efforts to reach out to other countries. And of course, the PRC is one that's on my mind. But I think that in times of austerity, in fluctuating times, economically and budgetarily, you need to have that backbone of multiple nations working together, in addition to public-private partnerships with the commercial industry. That provides a certain resilience that doesn't quite exist today. It does in a lot of science missions, but in human spaceflight, not quite as much.
How do you frame up? Anybody can at any time jump in with one more thing we'd like the generation ahead of you to fix before it's before they turn it over to you. You can jump in at any time. But for right now, the space exploration seems to be splitting into two parts. One part is the private companies that are taking over the access to low Earth orbit, maintaining that for us, and think about where that might be, not today, but 15 years after the access to low Earth orbit has been mastered and then those same private companies start looking for other things to do. And think about where NASA's going to be 15 years from today. And talk about that in terms of career opportunities for yourself, or what you would recommend to others. How would you recommend whether somebody should go to work for a private company versus going to work for NASA? How do you frame that up in terms of excitement, involvement, and the possibilities of the future?
Well, I would say that the two aren't mutually exclusive. You're going to have an interfacing between the federal government and commercial spaceflight and space science for many years to come. I would say that my role in that, I would love to be kind of the intersection of those two groups and those two paths that I think converge in certain areas. I see there being a great need as we expand the economic influence of the human species into the cosmos, into the solar system first. Solar system part of the cosmos, but ultimately you're going to need to have the right balance of regulations with the kind of the seeding that's necessary initially to create a boom. So again, there's going to be a kind of a crossing of those two paths, and I'd like to be a part of both of them.
Alex?
We're approaching a really exciting time to be a student coming into this industry. We have on one end commercial crew and commercial ventures in space, and hopefully within 15 years it'll be commonplace for a privately funded company to take astronauts to space, most likely maybe living on a privately funded habitat that's been built up there to do research. And at the same time, we're going to have NASA going out farther than it's ever been, at least hopefully by then in cislunar space, if not farther, doing research and pushing the boundaries of human exploration. And it's creating a lot of opportunities from a student's perspective. You can go into, what do you care about most? Do you care about pushing human boundaries? Then go work for NASA, go work on exploration. Do you care about maybe sharing space with other people? Space tourism is going to pick up with that. You can go work for a company that's working on getting as many people into space as possible to show them why it's so amazing. And it's going to depend on whether you're what your interests are and what you're excited in. And there's a lot of opportunities that are going to be available to students, and I think that's something we're all really excited about.
Patrick, do you have a response to that? You did.
Yeah, some of these are loaded questions. I don't really have a choice where I'm going to be for at least the next 5 years, but I think that both, like Alex mentioned, there are some terrific opportunities in both fields. I feel that the federal government is always going to have a place in space exploration, though private industry is going to be taking some of those away from us. I think that we're never going to give spy satellites to SpaceX to launch for us and maintain for us. We're going to be doing that work. And if you're interested in some of the more military applications of what space is for, I think that you definitely want to stay with the federal government. If you're interested in let's go exploring, or let's get some economic advantages out of space, you're going to want to focus on the private industry, which is where I think they're going to find a toehold, as you would say, Raphael. So,
Claire?
I agree with Alex as far as everyone choosing the path they want to go to. It depends a lot on personal preference, but also with Raphael, from my perspective of wanting to go into policy and research and writing and that aspect on the Hill, is I think they're going to be working a lot together, or else I think it's going to be really messy. So I think from my perspective, it would probably be a little bit of each.
According to Charlie this morning, it's going to be about 9 years from right now when we allow the space station to come down. What do you want to replace it with? What do you think these guys should replace it with? Or should they replace it? And if they are replacing it, what should it do different from the one that we've got now?
If we're looking to put up another habitat for human beings outside of Earth, not on Earth, I think we need to go farther. I think we need to go to the moon. We should put a habitat out there as a prep for us going to Mars. Have people living extendedly in a, not zero gravity, but a microgravity environment for a year and a half. Get them adjusted to really test bed the technologies that would be needed, the in situ research and reutilization technologies that need to be used to develop another planet. Get those test beds for that on the moon. It's our closest body. If you need to come back from it due to an emergency, you can come back a lot quicker than you can come back from Mars. And that's where I think we should go next. We should go back to the moon. We haven't been there in a long time, and we still don't know everything about it. We're still finding out new things every time we send a probe there. And before we go further into the solar system, I think we should understand what's closest to us first.
In terms of the International Space Station, I mean, you have some of the top minds working on this problem right now of sustainability of commercial space flight, of the sustainability of ISS potentially. I mean, let's think about it this way. In 2024, worst case scenario, or 2028, when we decide to, if we decide to deorbit it, this is at that point it'll be about a $200 billion investment. Right now I think we're around 125, 130 billion. And it's been a lot of time and effort has been put into creating this this observatory in orbit. It shouldn't be our only human spaceflight endeavor. Ideally there would be some sort of handoff that would occur, and I would say that the future of ISS is it runs in tandem with the future of commercial spaceflight, at least the near term. If we were to deorbit ISS prematurely, there's a possibility that it could deflate the commercial launch industry or cargo or ultimately, what's the incentive for a lot of these companies beyond perhaps asteroid mining, which might be a little bit further out? Give them an opportunity to be able to be successful in LEO, perhaps transfer over some of the responsibilities, and for as long as it took to be able to get the international agreements in place to be able to get the nations that are on ISS, it'll probably take about that long to get an agreement between the federal governments of these various nations and commercial companies. But I do see those two as being in tandem. The commercial companies, whether it be Boeing or SpaceX or SNC or whatever it is, we need to keep ISS running in order to keep them inspired, give them a toehold too, but also to enable us to be able to move onto the next level, which is beyond LEO.
Do each of you have any of you have a younger sibling or a younger cousin or something?
I have a younger brother and sister. They're twins.
Okay. How would they say NASA's doing with their social media?
My younger brother is a very smart individual who loves space and loves everything about space exploration. I don't think he would give NASA an A in their public relations and how they're doing necessarily.
An E for effort?
He's not a very generous person, but I think what his impression is that he doesn't know enough. I think that in situations like this, in rooms like this, we tell ourselves we're doing a great job. We have all this sort of public outreach. We're going to schools, we're talking to people, we're getting children interested in STEM majors, but I don't know if that's really the case. I think that my younger brother Matthew would say, well, NASA's never come and talked to me. I think that a Twitter page isn't necessarily enough to let the public know what you're doing, and I think that NASA needs the presence it had in the 60s again. I think it needs to say, hey, we're here and we're doing stuff, and look at the stuff that we're doing. Last year you guys put an optical communications array on the International Space Station. I'm doing research with that, and I found out about that like 2 nights ago, and I had no idea it was launched. I think that if I went to Space News, I would know, but it's not headline news, and it should be. That stuff is so cool, and we need to get people interested in it again.
I'd agree. I think our biggest problem right now is timeliness. NASA isn't always the first person to put out a story about a subject. In turn for that, a lot of the times we put out the best content, which matters for something, but if people are seeing it other places first, it kind of just isn't on their radar anymore.
Anyone else, cousin or anything?
Yeah, my little brother Pietro Perrino, he just finished up his physics major at the University of Mary Washington. We're very proud of him. He follows the NASA page on Facebook. I think he's on Twitter too. So I'm sure he's following him there as well. I think in comparison, yes, there can be improvements, and I can understand the frustrations with the latencies and trying to make sure that it passes the certain rigors and policies that exist there. But I would say, though, and I think that he would probably agree with me, that in comparison to many other agencies, NASA does a pretty awesome job in social media. And you have the tweet ups and the various social media events that they actually really tout, and that's known outside, I think, outside of the space community. I think that there are some other Facebook pages that, I can't say it necessarily, IFLS, that does a fantastic job of communicating science in general. And I think that while they're not partnered necessarily with NASA, they're certainly communicating space science and human spaceflight and all the various other sciences. So whether it's only up to NASA, I don't necessarily think it should be. But I think they're doing a pretty darn good job. There's always room for improvement, but they're doing pretty awesome.
For the last 5, 10, or 20 years, NASA has been engaged in something of a gridlock debate over destinations. Charlie said something, and I'm quoting him out of context because Charlie's smarter than this. I'm going to quote him out of context, but he says, "We need destinations for our vehicles." That's kind of backwards, isn't it? But what destination do you want us to go to? What destination do your colleagues your own age and younger want us to go to? What destination fires your imagination?
I think that we've had, I think what Raphael said was a total lack of continuity with the plans. If you, for some reason, slipped into a coma in 1975 and woke up today, and then you asked, "So what's been new in space?" And they said, "Well, we got to the moon a bunch of times," like you knew that, you were awake then, and then you fell asleep, and then we kind of went to Leo a bunch of times and to Geo, and then we lost the technology to even go to the moon. So I think there's an issue with then saying, well, we can't go to the moon anymore, so let's go to Mars. Let's prove that we can do a mission around the moon. Let's prove that we can do a mission back to the moon. Let's prove that we can do something before we try to go to Mars again. I think that Mars is an ambitious step. I think it's perhaps a little bit too ambitious at first. I think we need to have some reasonable goals set before we try that Mars destination.
Alex?
I completely agree with Patrick on that. We need to have stepping stones to get to Mars. We need to first go back to the moon, as he said. I also believe we need to go to an asteroid, as Administrator Bolden talked about earlier. We need to go to an asteroid. We need to put people in space stations or in at least space habitats further out as a stepping stone. We need to build up to Mars. We need to build up in basically incremental steps further and further out. First back to the moon, then to cislunar space, and then from there you pretty much got to go to Mars at that point. You might as well. And in that process, we should test bed the technologies we're going to need at every phase. And it's in that build-up to going to Mars, we need to drum up the public support with it.
Claire?
You said what fires my imagination, and I would say outside of our solar system and galaxy, but I know that isn't very practical. Something that excites me is the upcoming OSIRIS-REx mission. I think it's a great mission. I think the fact that samples are going to be returned to Earth, and that's, I'm pretty sure, since the lunar missions, those will be the biggest samples. I think that's important. I think it's important to know exactly what they're made of, their composition, and that's really exciting to me. And I think there should be more missions that are going out to asteroids.
Raphael?
So the moon, cislunar space, Phobos, Deimos, Mars, these are things that are, I'd say, continuity allowing, pretty achievable in the next 30 years or so. But I would say what really fires my imagination, and this is where my enthusiasm for astrobiology and search for life in the universe comes through. Titan and Europa, to me, are absolutely enthralling. I see the potential and should oceans exist under those hundreds of kilometers of ice on Europa, the potentials for biology there, and with a warm core that exists there, kind of the primordial soup of hydrocarbons on Titan, and the possibility of splashing down and putting probes in there and seeing what's going on, even if it's unicellular. That changes everything for all human history. Yeah, that might be one of the most profound discoveries in all of human history if we do achieve it. and it's 300 or 400 million miles in one direction potentially, if we so choose to go there.
Okay, this is an audience participation game, but it's only for the students in the audience. If you stood up a little while ago, you're the only ones participating. For the destination that most fires your imagination, how many hands do we have for the moon? 1, 2. No, students only. I see somebody with gray hair answering this question. Unless you're enrolled, you got to show me a student ID to vote in this. Okay, so it was for the moon? Asteroid. Mars. A lot of support for Mars. Titan. Europa. They're already doing it. And let's see, Titan, Europa, and what am I missing?
Enceladus.
Okay, sure. Star Trek. Starship Enterprise, explore the universe. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to have a big round of applause for future flight director Alex Case, future astronaut Patrick Dods, future U.S. Senator Clare Skelly, and future NASA Administrator Raphael Perrino. And on behalf of all of them, we want to thank all of you for handing them a NASA that's in great shape. So get to work.